Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of BreathTalks. And today we are going to have a lot of fun because I've got Star Wolf with me and her husband, Nikólaus. But on a serious note, Star Wolf is the founder of Shamanic Breathwork. And to open this interview today, I would love to just hand over to Star Wolf first of all. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having us on. We're delighted to be here today with you. So I'm just going to light a little smudge here for us. And, Niklauss and I live our life every day here in the mountains, Western North Carolina. We live our life every day in ceremony, and ceremony begins for me many days with smudging and prayer, perhaps pulling an oracle, which we can do that too. But even just the ceremony of breathing and being grateful for this day and knowing that we're here in love and in planetary service. That's our life. And that's our ceremony. So just sending everyone here that's joining us the heartbeat of the drum so that we remember that we have hearts. The world could really remember that right now. That everything has a heart. Trees have a heartbeat. Even the stones have a frequency, a vibration, a heartbeat. All creatures, great and small, have a heartbeat. The whole planet itself has a heartbeat, a vibration. Every star, every planet in the sky is vibrating and has a frequency and a heartbeat. Perhaps the whole universe is one big heartbeat. And in between those beats and the silence, it's much like the breath. It's much like breathing in, and that's the quiet place, and then the breathing out. And we hear the sound of our breath. We remember that our heart is beating and that everything is connected through frequency and through this beautiful heartbeat of the cosmos. So as the smoke burns, the sage burns, the smoke comes, let it come to you. And let anything today, this moment, that you want to release just to go into that smoke. And take a nice big deep breath. So say, in with the good, out with the bad. Just letting go. It may not be bad, but just letting go of what no longer serves us, what we're finished with or complete with. It's okay to let things die. And it's really wonderful when they die, because then we can birth something new. And that's where we are on this planet, or we better be. We gotta birth something new. Post haste, as they might say. It's time. It may even be overdue. I don't know. Although I always believe in perfect timing at some level. So let's let everything go that doesn't serve us right now. Let it go in our minds, because that's where it begins. And then send that message to our hearts. It begins here and it ends here. When our heart is in our dreams, our schemes, our beliefs, our knowing, that's when we take action and not before. As long as it's a thought, it's a thought. When it migrates to our heart, it migrates out into the world. So take a moment with your eyes closed to take a deep breath, to exhale fully, to let go, and to imagine in your mind's eye what it is that you want to release. It may not be bad, it may just be done or complete. But what you're ready and you want to let go of. And then pass it into your heart. Inform, give information to your heart that says, I'm ready, or ready or not. I'm willing to be ready to release whatever really is not serving me, serving others, serving our beautiful planet. And perhaps I don't know yet what I want to replace that with. Perhaps all I know is what I don't want, and that's okay. That's a great place to begin. Because there's nothing more precious or sacred than a wide open heart that's ready to receive the new vision, the new download, the new inspiration, the inspiraling-ration. And that comes as we breathe and say yes to life. Yes, I'm ready. Inspire me, inspirit me. Give me insight. And just notice what comes into your heart. Maybe something very specific. Breathe into it. If your heart is not open, then breathe into it. And exhale from it. And if your heart is open, then breathe it even bigger. For bigger dreams and bigger pictures and bigger visions and creations. Go big. Go big with your heart. Go big with your vision. Go big with your message and your truth and your purpose. Playing small has never gotten any of us anywhere. You might even take your hands and put them on your heart for a moment and bless your heart. Acknowledge your courage. The word courage comes from the word heart. In French, the cœur, le cœur, courage is the heart. Have courage to be who you really are. Have courage to open your mouth and speak from your heart's truth. May your mind and your heart not be at odds or a battle with each other. May you not be disheartened. May you not be discouraged, meaning without heart. This is a time when we could all become very discouraged and say, haven't we learned anything yet? And the truth is, we've learned a lot. And just because we've learned a lot does not mean that the spiral path will stop spinning. In fact, what I've learned is that the initiations get bigger. To see how much heart we have, how much love we have, how much compassion we can conjure up. The opportunity to be big, to be bold, to breathe. We tend to stop breathing during trauma and drama, or to breathe very fast and not to be able to catch our breath. Slow down, drop in, and just breathe. in the end, all that will matter, and matter means manifest, all that will matter is what we have loved and what has loved us. May we remember that when we slow down, quiet our minds, and truly open our hearts.
Wow, I need to come back to earth now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
Hmm.
So, Star Wolf, I was introduced to breath work through my shamanic practices. Strangely enough, I was talking to my guides, and I was in Glastonbury at the time, and I said, "What's my purpose of being here?" And they said, "Oh, you must learn to breathe." And I'm like, "What? Learn to breathe? What do you mean?" And I thought, what a load of rubbish. But then I got the Glastonbury Oracle, which is a free magazine, tells you what's going on. Sandra Ray liberation breathing. Okay. There it was. So that was my introduction to breath work. How about you?
Well, I have to go back a little bit, or a long ways actually, back to the 60s.
Yeah.
So in the 1960s, everybody started to do transcendental meditation because the Beatles did it. And I was a young teenager, and I saw the Beatles, and I had a big crush on all of them, and I wanted to, be into whatever they were into. And they were going off to India to be with a Maharishi, and they were doing breathing and meditating and TM, as we called it. And then I went away to college, and everybody was doing yoga and LSD and, doing breathing techniques. And that's where I first learned all of that and got into it. And you can imagine it's been an evolution, and let's just say that my path, this long and winding, the Beatles said, the spiral path, brought me eventually to a place where I had to make a choice if I was going to live or die. Because another thing that came along with the 60s was a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol and a lot of free love and wonderful stuff. But it also left some of us a bit ravaged. And, some of us didn't make it through. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, a lot of people didn't make it through that period of time. Maybe they made it through, they just made it through to someplace else. But for those of us left behind who were here and saying, wow, what was that huge, movement that came through? And where are we now? At 29 years young, I found sobriety, and I realized that what I was seeking was not going to be found in a substance, people, places, or things. So that's when I began to find other forms of breath work, which started out with holotropic breath work, which went on to integrative breath work. I had read Loving Relationships with Sandra Ray, and had read about Leonard, but I'd not actually met Leonard and Sandra until Leonard called me years later and said, "I want to come out and see you." And then we met Sandra in Bali. I don't know.
Yeah, Sandra and Marcus in 2016.
Yeah, that was the first time.
I think we shared a meal with them.
Yeah, they invited us over. So that was the first time we ever met them. So you can just imagine. And plus, I've worked with shamans who taught breathing, and everywhere I went to, whether it was with gurus or shamans, eventually, past the plant medicines, past the psychedelics, always came back to the breath. Yeah. And so I just felt like go to the heart of the matter, just I can bypass those other things. I don't need those because I've got this with me all the time to change my consciousness when I need to.
Yep. Absolutely. And you've got a really interesting story about how you met Leonard.
Well, it's yeah, a few years ago, we had let's put it this way. I moved from California and I moved here to North Carolina, and we created this retreat center in this place, and a lot of people started coming here instead of us traveling so much around the world. And when one day, and this is back when I still, had a phone, like a phone in the house, my phone rang. I don't know how on earth, he got this number or whatever, but the phone rings and I answered it. And he says, who am I speaking to? I said, this is Star Wolf. And I'm like, and he says, this is Leonard Orr. And I said, uh-huh. This is a prank call. That's what I thought. And he said, this is Leonard Orr. And I said, uh-huh. And he said, Leonard Orr. And I said, okay. And he said, I want to come out and see you. And I'm like, who is this? He said, this is Leonard Orr, and I would like to come out and see you. And I'm like, is this really Leonard Orr? He said, this is really Leonard Orr. So anyway, we went on like this for about 5 minutes. It's kind of like a joke, but eventually he just said, I heard you're doing breath work. And I thought, is he accusing me? Because, does he think I stole his breath work or something? Because it's somewhat quite different.
He's very dry.
He is, it was no like, hi, I hear you're doing breath work. Let's see what, and the next thing I know, he just said, I want to come see you. And I said, okay. So I wasn't sure who was going to show up at the door. So he came and we sat down and he just looked at me and he was like observing me. And then I tried to think of something to say, like, and so I looked at him and I just said, well, Leonard, I said, and I started telling him about Shamanic Breathwork and how I created it and how I've been around, for more than 2 decades now. And it was going on 3 decades. And I started telling him this, and he says, and I said to him, I was inspired by your work and Groff's, and I studied with Stan Groff, and anyway, I just went on all that. And then I said to him, you're the grandfather of this work because you inspired Stan Groff and you inspired others, and my teacher, Jacqueline Small, she breathed with you. So, you're really the grandfather of Shamanic Breathwork. And he went, I'm not the grandfather. I'm young Leonard. And I thought, oh my God, I've said the wrong thing. I've offended this man that I thought the icon, And he says, if you want to know who the grandfather is, it's Babaji.
Ah.
And I said, Babaji, I highly honor Babaji. And I said, how is he the grandfather of this work? He said, because he's my guru and he's my teacher. And he said, and he's the one that taught me about the breath. And he taught me that if you could do equal amounts of being under the water, equal amounts of breathing, equal amounts of being in the fresh air and the sunlight and by a fire and touching the earth with bare feet each day, that if you could find the perfect balance of that, you could be immortal like him. And he said, and that was my practice, was practicing water, air, fire, and earth in equal measure every day. And it blew me away. So what went from kind of a weird situation and a joke became this realization that, this breath work that's come through me, the shamanic breath work that I've birthed into the world, and has a part of all my teachers in it, but even a teacher I never met, all the way back to Babaji.
Yeah, Leonard talks about how it was while he was in the bathtub, he just started doing the connected breath. And when they discovered who he was by going to his ashram in India, Babaji turned around to Leonard and say, did you like the breath I taught you?
I love it.
Yeah. And that's how this all started and came back to the planet, because I'm sure it's been here, you know, many times before, but it's that spiritual aspect that's so incredibly important, the aspect that we cannot explain when we experience the breath in our body. And how was that for you when you first started, you know, doing the connected breathing and letting go and feeling it?
It blew my socks off. My first breath work, you know, I had other things, like I said, like transcendental meditation and yoga and all those kind of things. But the first breath work session I ever had was with Stan Groff and his people, which was a 3-hour breathing session. Theirs were 3 hours. And I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea whatsoever. And they just said, lay down on the floor, and we had a partner, and you're going to be breathing. They demonstrated it. They gave us they talked about it endlessly for about 5 hours before we even did it, because they were warning you and saying this and all the places you could go so that you could be safe, you know, and it was kind of like this is like build up. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this, you know? And then I did it, and it changed my life forever. I got up off the floor, and all I could say, I couldn't talk. I was so blown out. But I just said, all I would say to people, they'd say, how was the breath work? Just like I said, this is what I'm going to do. And they said, well, what did you think about? And I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I couldn't say anything else for like a day. They'd say something, I go, this is what I'm going to do. That's all I could say. So it just completely turned my world upside down. And, you know, the upshot of that is that, you know, I birthed Shamanic Breathwork several years after that, through my work with shamanism and other things, and I married shamanism and breath work is what I did, brought those together. And in birthing that leg of the work, if you will, or that branch of the work, you know, I wrote a book about it, and it went out into the world, and it began to touch a lot of people, and it brought a lot of people into my life, into the work that we do. I mean, Niklauss found us through, you know, Shamanic Breathwork book, and had a huge experience himself before he got here with that experience. So, yeah.
So, yeah, how did you get into it, Nikólaus?
You know, for me, it all began, I was born asthmatic. And so I've had a lot of a long journey with breath since I was young, where they used to take me to different doctors who would tell me I was breathing wrong. And then they would teach me these different ways of breathing. And like Starwolf very much, I came to a place on the wheel of life and death. And I knew I needed to die if I was going to continue living. And as Starwolf mentioned, I found her book on shamanic breathwork. I was in a local bookstore, and it was just there. And I immediately felt this kind of electric current shoot through my body when I saw it, and then as I was reading it. Wow. And so in the book, Starwolf talks a little bit about the process. She's got a chapter on breathing, on breath work by yourself, and some music. And so as I was doing that, I just knew that there was something in it for me. And it's a bit out of a movie. I wrote her an email from there and just said, you know, I'm a plant who's overgrown its container. My soul is dying. And I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I was saying I'm going to walk to California, and my prayer is that I die along the way somehow. And so I didn't expect her to actually even get the email, let alone respond.
Yeah.
And this is when her late husband, her husband at the time, Brad Collins, reached back to me a couple days later. And he invited me out to North Carolina to see what they were doing out here and possibly intern with them. And so from there, it just, you know, it was meant to be. It was truly written in the stars for me.
And how was it breaking through asthma?
Yeah, you know, it's a medicine I share with a lot of our students, because when I first, you know, engaged with the shamanic breathwork process, my first trip was like the best LSD trip I'd ever had. It blew all the drugs I had in my system away. It held nothing for those. But then after that, I started experiencing a contraction. And as I would go into the breathwork breath, my asthma would actually flare up to where it would feel like an asthma attack. and
Yeah.
my body and my lungs would go through these contraction phases.
Mm.
But as I was supported and staying with the process, eventually it reached this place where I broke through to the other side and I stopped carrying an inhaler on me. I mean, since I was a little kid, I had an inhaler in my pocket always.
You're in the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, I'd been hospitalized for a couple weeks at a time at different points. And so there was something about the breath work that helped me face whatever was the undercurrent of the asthma, to where I wasn't scared of it anymore. And even if I had flare-ups, what I learned is that the breath would help me from going into that state of panic, and that I'd be able to stay relaxed even while different parts of my system was in contraction, and that I would be okay and I didn't need my inhaler.
You know, it almost sounds like the ancient initiation ritual where you go to a point where you have to get beyond the fear.
Mm-hmm.
And did you feel that when when you were at that point? What was it that kept you going, knowing that you would?
Yes, I can remember very specifically. So I had I so when I came here, I was the youngest breathwork facilitator who was certified. I was 20 years at the time.
Wow.
And I was really in an accelerated program because I went through multiple programs back to back. So it was like breathwork after breathwork after breathwork, this really intense series. And I remember this one breathwork throughout this series that I was being held by Brad. He was a dear beloved and mentor of mine. And he was in a like kind of holding my body and constricting me. And I reached this point where I just started screaming, I can't breathe. And we were in the middle of a rebirthing. And I remember Starwolf was in the room. I don't know, she kind of came in and out of the journey, but Brad was there the whole time. And I had a co-journeyer with me as well. And, you know, he would slow down and he would stop, but he would stay there with me. But then he would slowly start constricting again until I started screaming I couldn't breathing. And then they would say, but you are breathing. Keep breathing.
Wow.
Move into it and move through it. And eventually through that breath work, somehow I rebirthed into it. And I really could feel that that was ahead of that fear of not being able to breathe. Yeah.
Incredible. And that is so inspirational to many people who do suffer. I had a client recently, and unfortunately he didn't continue with sessions, with asthma. And it is wonderful to hear that, really is. And being held by a man restricting you. Come on, you can do it. You are breathing. I love it.
Yeah.
You are. You'll get through this. Yeah. So wonderful. Now, what is your tradition with your native tradition the shamanic tradition you come from?
Well, it comes from many places, to be honest with you, because at the same time that I was finding the breath, okay, and this was in my early 30s. It's like at the same time that I was finding that, because I'd already done the other kind of breath with transcendental meditation and yoga and different things like that. But at the time that I was finding that, I was also suddenly on the market were all these books, Medicine Woman, with Lynn Andrews, and and all these different things were going on. It's interesting because Lynn and I are now friends, and she interviews me now for my books and things. But at the time, I was like Lynn Andrews and the Medicine Woman, and and all this kind of thing. And Brooke Medicine Eagle's work, is with Buffalo Woman Comes Dancing and Singing and all that. And I was just consuming this. And I was friends with a Cherokee woman who was a couple of years younger than me. And we were young mothers together. And it was kind of a beautiful story how this happened, because I entered into a place of sobriety where I let go of all substances and worked to do that because I'd become dependent upon them. And my Cherokee friend and I were dependent on them together. We had a friendship that was kind of interwoven with that sort of thing. And we were both spiritual, but that sometimes goes hand in hand. And at the same time, when I moved on to my path, there was a while, she still had a path to go a while with her addictions and that sort of thing. And she was not forthcoming with sharing her traditions because she loved me, but it was like, you're not native. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was kind of closed. And you can understand that. I mean, you can understand why native people would say that sometimes, especially to blonde hair, blue eyed people. Okay. Um, but then there came a time when she was in trouble with the substances and she came back to me and asked for help. And I helped her and I supported her and did a variety of things. I actually sent her to treatment. She came back and that sort of thing. And then she said, I want to share with you. She said, going through recovery, I learned that, about a higher power and that's universal, and she said, so I want to share the teachings with you. And so she started sharing teachings with me. So here we were, two young, sober mothers in our 30s. I was a licensed social worker and therapist, and I was working in the field of addictions. And she came back and she started taking me through sweat lodges. We built a lodge and we did the sweat lodge. It was just the two of us out in the country. We lived way out in the country. We had little kids, and she's teaching me, and all these different traditions from her lineage. And at the time, it was just so beautiful. We would find, an animal that had been hurt or killed, or run over or whatever. She would say, oh, let's, take that out of the road and bless it and do a ritual and ceremony and send its spirit onward. And because we came across it, then we would acknowledge that it was that maybe it had medicine for us. Maybe we were allowed to take a feather or a claw, and she showed me how to do things like that. And sometimes the medicine would say, please don't remove anything from me, just remove me from the road. So you begin to learn to listen to the spirit of the animals. And, and all of a sudden I started remembering that I did all of that as a child. I would see maybe an animal that had died or something, and I would say a prayer for it when I was little, just automatically, and things like that. We would, I went back to talking to the trees again and talking to the water again. And before I remember the two of us going out to a waterfall and taking our clothes off and getting in the waterfall and playing in the waterfall and talking to the waters. And it was, much of it's like coming home to your inner child, quite frankly, because the magic is there and it's in all of us. We're very indigenous as children. We're very indigenous to the earth if we have half a chance. Kids even eat dirt, it's like there's a part of us that just knows to connect to the earth in this way. So it began there with my friend Teresa, but it's a long story, but I'm going to speed it up for you very quickly here and say that that's where it began in childhood. It came back in sobriety. It came back in the 60s. It came back in sobriety. It came back with my friend Teresa, and the explosion that started happening in the 1980s of shamanism that started coming back, and as that started coming back, it was just, I flew to it like a moth to the flame. I've had many, many, many experiences, but I'm going to fast forward to that. My friend Teresa and the breadcrumbs that led me there was in search for a spiritual grandmother, whether she was in the other dimension or on this plane. That's what I was longing for. Some of the medicine women I had read about, they talked about the grandmothers, and my own grandmother had died when I was 12, that I was so close, and she was very Scotch-Irish, indigenous, Celtic kind of energy. And so I found, or I should say, grandmother Twilight Niche of the Seneca Wolf Clan Nation found me through a vision that I had and gave me a name, Star Wolf. And I didn't know she really existed or not. And eventually, and I've written about it in all my books, eventually I found a way to find this grandmother. And when I got to her place on the Seneca reservation, and I met her for the first time, she looked at me and she just said, I gave you a name in a vision. What is your name? And I said, Star Wolf. And then my little doubting Thomas came up like, well, she didn't know my name, or why did she ask me my name? Why didn't she just say, hello, Star Wolf? And she looked at me and she smiled and she said, and I gave you that name in a vision in an underground cave, Kiva. And that's exactly true. And I just said, I almost fainted at that point. And I mean, at that moment, you know, reality clashes and you go, this is really happening. This wasn't just a vision, even though visions are powerful. This is real. And what I've been following, just like Niklauss, you know, calling up or, you know, coming or writing and thinking he would never hear. I never answered. People emailed me, thousands of people. I very, very seldom answer because I couldn't answer so many.
Yeah.
You know, I would answer as many as I could, but never did I ever say to any of them, do you want to come here to our home in North Carolina? And yet the synchronicity for him is, you know, at the time I was married to Brad, right? And Brad became his mentor.
Yeah.
He shares the same birthday as Brad, October 12th.
No way.
That
Wow.
was the omen. So I was learning about shamanism when I found this book. And when I reached out, and I was learning about how to listen and follow omens.
Yeah.
And that was like the big omen for me of, okay, I'm right where I need to be and I have to follow this.
Perfect.
So, you know, it's the same kind of energy. And little did we know when Niklauss came here and, you know, Brad was his mentor, little did we know a few years later that Brad would make a journey with cancer, that he would leave, and that Niklauss would be here and be so dear to my heart, and that we would fall in love and come together. You know, I mean, we were already in love, but in a different way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, the shamanic world works like that. The shamanic world doesn't care about what society thinks.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't care about things that aren't real.
Yeah.
You know, the shamanic world.
I had an experience that isn't as incredible as that, but I was doing this spiritual hypnotherapy training in California, and right at the end of my session, the word Tiwa came to me, and I'm like, Tiwa, what's that? And I'm like, my mind's going, what a load of rubbish, ignore it. But no, Tiwa kept coming through. So I said to the lady giving me the session, look, this word Tiwa is coming up. And she said, oh, you're lucky. I studied anthropology, and that's a tribe from New Mexico. And I'm like, wow. So I made it there to Taos Pueblo. Oh, my whole body was vibrating and standing on it, and I absolutely loved it. And I felt, wow, I'm home here.
Yeah.
I really felt it. Yeah. So even though my genetic heritage is Celtic, and I had always felt a lot more connected with North American cultures, until I did a plant medicine journey, and it was connecting through my mother's line to the famine. And I was still carrying the energy of famine in me. I couldn't fast at the time. And so when I moved through that, I was able to fast. Now, you've also got a genetic heritage with the Celtic clans too. So tell me about that.
Well, you know, I want to dive into that more. And, you know, there's, I think that I have, maybe like a lot of people that come from this tradition, a deep memory of witch burnings.
Yeah. Like,
you know, that will kind of just make you think like, maybe I shouldn't do that again. You know what I mean? And actually
delve that way.
Like, oh, do something else, you know, like, yes, I believe in Jesus, you know, it's like, and I do, you know, but at the same time, there was a part of me, people would say, well, why don't you study that tradition more? Because, you know, that's not your actual roots this lifetime and that sort of thing. And first of all, I wanted to say that, you know, it feels weird to say I believe in reincarnation. It's just like, I know there's reincarnation. You know, I don't believe in it. I know there's reincarnation. I have had too many experiences in my breath works of other lifetimes. Now, whether that's in real time and time, or whether that's in multidimensional realities, because you get to a certain point where you realize that all reality is happening in this moment. And it's multidimensional, and the past and the present and the future are all one thing. So there's really not past lives and future lives, or there's just the present. So when you get to that point, you're just saying you have this big fat shamanic life, and it's like we're all everything, quite frankly, you know. But this piece of my soul or this piece of my consciousness that's experiencing things, you
Mm.
know, uh, what is my lineage? So in this breath of life, in this particular lineage, there is a blood lineage that goes back to England and Scotland and Ireland and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But my actual physical grandmother on my mother's side, Callie, K-A-L-O-I-E, Callie Jones, and her maiden name was Poole. And, they came from that Scotch-Irish vein.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it, a little girl, because she was a Christian and very close to Jesus, country Jesus. We're in Kentucky, and it's very earthy, it's about being barefoot outside, and Jesus is in the, we pray to Jesus and the aliens at the same time, and the fairies, So I just thought everybody prayed to the aliens and Jesus and the fairies, and I still do, Jesus and the aliens. Those are pretty much my three energies in that way.
That's
good. But I look now, what I'm saying? I now see that she was still pulling on those roots, but her family had come over. She was like maybe, second or third generation. So it became, I'm not, she wasn't watered down, but I would say that it was just integrated into what was acceptable. But as I did breathworks, I'd always had this feeling in my life, even as a teenager, that I had been burned at the stake. It was just a thing. And when I did psychedelic trips, that came up for me. And in my breathworks, I can't tell you how many times that has come up for me. And it's interesting. We've led groups to Africa, to Egypt. We just got back from Egypt, to Bali, to Teotihuacan, to Peru, and all this sort of thing. And yet I've never really gone, and I went to Scotland once, but I've never really, really allowed myself to go fully into those that I've done everything but that.
Yeah.
And I have read about it, of course, and I've got certain things that I do, but I asked myself a while back, some years ago, like, why haven't I really allowed myself to go into that? And it came to me so clearly. It's because you've been burned at the stake a lot of times. Not just once, a lot of times. You've always gotten into trouble. You've never been able to not do this. And so, interestingly enough, we're getting ready to go on an Avalon tour and to take a group of people. Some of the people we just took to Egypt, some that we've taken to Mexico and other places that like to travel with us are going with us. But we're going on that tour, and we're looking to next year to hopefully come to Scotland and to go to Ireland as well, but to make that journey. And I think that, isn't it interesting that that's probably my biggest roots this lifetime? But I think that it's going to be a very big soul retrieval for me.
A big one. I hope you can break through that, because there are some incredible places, where the veil is thin, and the wee people are
yeah, I've met them. I've met them.
And there are wonderful places where it is tangible here. Incredible. Yeah. In fact, if you're going to Scotland, there's an island on a lake where Mary, Queen of Scots, was detained. And there's an absolutely incredible portal there that the energy is... I'll pass that on.
Yes, please pass that on to us. Yeah, absolutely.
And please come to Ireland.
Yes. Well, our good friend Judy Redhawk, who's part of our team, we have our Shamanic Breathwork team, and with Venus Rising, and she's spent a lot of time in Ireland. And I think a couple of years ago, she went and spent a month there with her cousin or something. And she's been after me for a while. She's like, now you've taken people everywhere around the world, okay? And we bring a lot of people here to Western North Carolina, to the mountains here where we live. come here all the time to be with us. And she said, we've really got to take a group there. And so that's the next place that we, after this England trip, after this Avalon trip, that's the next place that we're looking to take a group.
Fantastic. Now you've got a new book coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Niklauss to tell us about it, because he's worked so hard in the implementation of this and helping to, this book would not be happening without him.
Well, and it's really exciting. So this will be Starwolf's 12th book. And what's so exciting about this book is Starwolf is very much an Aquarian in nature. She's got like 5 planets in Aquarius or something like that. And so, you know, what drew me to Venus rising and the lineage of shamanic breathwork is that Aquarian energy of, we do it as a tribe. We all come together with our different medicines and we work as one. And that's exactly what this book is. This book has 28 co-authors in it, and it's all Venus rising graduates, and almost every one of them is a shamanic breathwork facilitator. And so what this book is it's shamanic breathwork, the nature of change. Wow. And so it's addressing the heart of the matter that Starwolf was talking about change, what it is, and how to bring it about in your life. And so every chapter, the author shares their story, exactly what we're doing here, about their relationship to breathwork, how they found breathwork, how shamanic breathwork in particular called them to their journey, and where it's led them, and what medicine they've brought forth into their lives as a sacred purpose to others from it. And so it's 2-part chapters where each author shares their story, and then they give an offering, a medicine offering, to the reader. And so it's very much the lineage that Starwolf has been cultivating over these 30, 40 years of shamanic breathwork, where now it's all of these different facilitators sharing how they are a part of the lineage and how they're expanding the lineage.
Wow, great. Yeah, Chrissy Conroy's got a
Chrissy.
It's funny, I was wondering if you knew Chrissy when you were talking. Yeah,
you'll have to interview them. They're all amazing. You know, some of them are really focused on working with cacao or trance dance or kundalini yoga, but they all bring the shamanic breath work into whatever it is they're doing. So as a part of the really experiential piece for their offerings and stuff. So it makes me so proud of them. And you see, that's what I wanted to have happen. I don't want people to be, I remember one time I said to Grandmother Twilight, I honor you, Graham, and I keep true to your teachings, what you share. I said, but I also do these other things, and this becomes a part of it. And she said, well, I said, so, I would, not going to be a clone of you and everything. And she laughed. She said, I've never been fond of clowns anyway. I said, I think she was about 90 at that point. And I said, well, a clone is kind of a replica of you. And she said, oh, there's only one grandmother, Twilight, so, and she said, be yourself, she said, I bless you, and I've shared my traditions with you and my medicine. And I want you to take that to the world, but add your medicine to it, just acknowledge the lineage. So that's really what Niklauss is speaking about. It's really important to me that I acknowledge Leonard, that I acknowledge Stan Groff, that I acknowledge Jackie Small, that I acknowledge Grandmother Twyla, that I acknowledge my friend Teresa, who was my neighbor, who put me in that lodge. I acknowledge, it's so important when I believe, and I want to say this because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. Because I see a lot of people kind of popping up and like, blah, blah, blah. This is their new thing that they've created with no recognition of their elders and their lineages.
Yeah.
And it's so disrespectful. And I think that's part of what some of the indigenous people, why they don't want to share. Yeah. Some of them go ahead and share because they feel like the world needs it, but some are very close because they feel like, you just kind of steal it and take it and don't acknowledge. And we've had a few people even do that with our work, not very many, but just a few. And I think it's such a dishonoring to not acknowledge and why wouldn't you want to stand on the shoulders of those brilliant people who put their whole lives into keeping this knowledge and wisdom alive, and to know that it doesn't take away from you to acknowledge you're standing on their shoulders. In fact, it adds to you, and the fact that you have the wisdom to reach back for the ancient wisdom, and then to bring it forth and to bring it, as you bring it forth, to add your wisdom to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for those people who haven't tried shamanic breathwork, what are the elements that you might put into a session, and how is it different to standard breathwork, connected breathing?
Well, I'll say a little bit about how it's different, and then Niklauss is so much better at being linear than me.
I'll take it as a compliment.
It is a compliment. It is. I mean,
he planets in Aquarius, you are an alien.
I'm an alien. I have Sagittarius sun and Scorpio moon. So, and then 5 planets in Aquarius, rising. The masculine and the feminine. So let's let Niklauss talk about the components. But I will say that the medicine of this work is deeply transformational. What was the other question? I forget.
How is it different from the
other
breathwork lineages?
Okay, so here's how it's different from the others. A big part of my medicine actually comes from having been a child of the 60s, having gone into unconsciously and innocently into addiction. From my sensitive soul. Some of us who are very, very sensitive, people are very sensitive, kind of like the Native Americans that so many became alcoholic, because they were so close to spirit already and the earth. There's a sensitivity. When you have that kind of sensitivity, sensitive people have to be very, very careful about ingesting things. I've learned. Food, anything we can get addicted to, we will. It's just like we merge with everything. We're like empathic. We merge with everything and become it. So for me, a big part of what I bring to the shamanic world is how to do shamanic work and also be in recovery and discovery instead of addiction.
Yes.
I specialize in working in addiction, and in March 21st, I will have been sober from alcohol and all mind altering substance called drugs. That doesn't include chocolate, by the way.
Some nights.
So, but to bring in what sobriety really is, because I love ecstasy. I love to be ecstatic. Being sober doesn't mean that you're not ecstatic. All right. In fact, you're even more ecstatic because you're more alive. But the sobriety is a sincere and a dedication to not becoming addicted, or if I do become addicted, to acknowledge that I become addicted to something and to begin to sober up around that. I have to get sober around my Facebook time, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And to social, because part of what I want to do is be on social media and reach out to people, but I also had to be careful of how deeply I go into that. And that's true for me with everything.
Yeah.
I'm just, I tend to be able to merge with everything. So what is sobriety really? Because some things we want to merge with. When I go in the woods, I want to merge with the elements, but then I also have to come back out and chop wood and carry water and, pay my bills and those kinds of things. So I think I bring to breath work in this time of everybody wanting to be high and ecstatic again, I think I bring a sobriety. I think I bring a groundedness, because I have to work on groundedness myself, and manifestation, and being able to bring forth, like the example of these 28 people. You see, these 28 people in the book, we have hundreds, perhaps thousands of people we've trained and that are doing the work in the world. That's groundedness with altered states work. And I think that because that's been my nemesis and that's been my sacred wound, it's also been my gift
Yeah.
And I think that's the real thing that I bring to shamanic breath work, that a lot of breath work doesn't bring, is a grounded sobriety and embodiment of the altered states.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
Babaji always said, go for the middle path, because it's not about being in absolute bliss all the time, because that will make you crash. You know, you do want to go into bliss, but it's not something to be sought after all the time.
Right.
As long as you can walk and a tidal wave is coming at you and walk through it, that's what you want to be.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, I agree with you and understand about that sobriety
Yeah.
and just being open to the world.
So I'd
What?
like for Niklauss to speak into some of the components, because and how, if you would, and how some of them
Yeah.
differ. Yeah.
So, Starwolf tells the story about when she was working with Jacqueline Small and she was working with breathwork, that's around the time period grandmother Twilight came into her life. And so she really brought together those two components, where just like how we started this podcast off today in a ceremony with the drum, with the smudge, anytime we do a program and breathwork, for us, it's a ceremony. And so we like to open the container by calling in the directions, calling in the elements, all of our grandparents, earth, water, fire, and air, and ether, and animating spirit through us. And so we like to bring in that spiritual element that you've been talking about, and inviting great mystery to come into the space and to take us, that we surrender to great mystery and to the unknown. And so with that, the shamanic breathwork ceremony for us, as Starolf was saying, is the container that we set. It's very much rooted in the present sober moment, and it's about integration for us. It's about growing corn in our lives. Yes, dropping acid and going on that experience where you understand all of the universe is an amazing experience to have. But what earthly good is it, as grandmother Twilight would say, if you can't bring it home to yourself, to your family, to your community, and to our world?
Yep.
And so for us, the shamanic breath work is about bringing it home. So one of the key elements that we talk about is we do a deep processing circle after the breath work.
Right.
And when I'm talking to folks, I say, for us, the processing afterwards, that integration, is as important, if not more important, than the journey itself.
Yeah.
Because the experience is great, but if you don't take time to bring that experience home, it's just another awesome, epic experience that's like a dream and you don't really remember it. And so we do processing with all of our shamanic breathwork work. And then for me, the key components, so I like to talk about the holy trinity of, we have the breath, but then we have the music. We bring frequency into the breath work. And so Starolf and I customize our sets where we work from the root chakra up to the crown chakra. And they're, about an hour, give or take. But we put together this music that's really evocative, and it's like going into a movie. We were talking before the interview about going to the movies with COVID and everything going on. When we hit play on a shamanic breathwork music set, it's epic. It'll take you all through the cosmos. And so that's a part of what I teach in our trainings, is how to put the music together and why we use certain elements of music the way we do, and how to choreograph that with the breath. But then, you've got the breath and you've got this frequency of music, which is highly activating. Then comes movement. And we talk a lot about how, to be able to move and to vocalize and to bring body work into the breathwork floor, that you don't have to have it, but God, is it great when you do have it? Because to have that body work, like I was talking about the compression body work I was receiving when I was going through my asthmatic breathworks, there's so much you can do with that hands-on experience to help activate and guide through activating parts of breath work to bring us through the other side. So what we find is, when we're working with anybody, who says, I really need change in my life, or I'm stuck with this, or, I'm doing the breath, but nothing's happening, or things like that. We work with these three elements: the body, the beat, and the breath. And we find that the three of them together is just like a force of nature that takes you where you need to go.
I was just going to quickly say that Grandmother Twilight had the opportunity to experience breath work when she was like 90. And she came out to where I was doing a retreat, and I wanted the people to get to meet her. I brought her out to San Francisco, an area where I was living. And she came out and she sat in the group, and she was sitting in a chair in the center of a group of about 50 people who were lying down breathing. And she was sitting in a chair, comfy chair, and the lights were down and the music was playing. It was about an hour and a half. It was very intense. And, we did the smudging, we did it all. And, and after we were done, her eyes were really big, and because she'd watch people rebirth and watch people, like scream, and then watch people act ecstatic, and, afterwards. And I said, well, Graham, what did you think? And she said, I wish I'd known about this sooner. It was so cute. She was like 5 foot tall, and she's like, I just wish I'd known about this sooner. I loved it. I just loved it.
So yeah, it has been hard in COVID times where we haven't been able to do in-person sessions. And what you were saying about the body, the touching and the body work is important. I once had a client who Mexican, and she was kidnapped once, so it came up while she was in the session. So I held her down and I said, you've got to break free. And she, she was struggling, and then all of a sudden she just like pushed me right off, and the energy got released. And that was like, you being held and constricted, and you just had, there's something inside of you just went forward, and you
and it's been challenging, but you want to say a little something about how we've done the body work, or is that okay to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Online with people
with COVID and things. Yeah, I'm such a kinesthetic person that I have difficulty with audio only. I really need to see you and feel you to be in that energy. And so what we did when COVID happened, it's funny, you're talking about those highs and those lows. We were just at Teotihuacan, Mexico, had a group of 50 people from like 17 countries graduating on the top of the third largest pyramid that you could climb at the time. And it was this epic high for everybody.
December 2019.
We come home, Storolf and I are sick for like a month. And then you hear about COVID, and we're like, yeah, okay. We're a part of it.
We think we already had it.
And so from there, we were talking about how do we reach people who really needed it more than ever with the isolation that was happening. And so what we did is we have our level 1 program is SHIP, Shamanic Healing Initiatory Process. And in that, we teach about the spiral path and about the birth process. And how those are connected and how we can navigate them with the breathwork ceremony. And so we brought that online, where we do it online for 2 weeks straight, every day, 14 days for 4 hours a day. We had people meet online. And then, of course, the breathworks were different because you'd be breathing solo in your own space. And so what we did is we set it up where we had our staff on the computers while you're breathing, where you can be breathing, and then you can write to us and say, I'm feeling this. And we can write back. Like I remember one person was sharing with me that they were feeling a really intense energy that was built up, and it was kind of caught right here in their shoulder blades. Well, naturally, without thinking about it, I would be able to go and start kind of caressing the shoulder blades, maybe wrapping my arms around that person and rocking with them. So I had to write back and be like, okay, is there a wall? Do you have pillows, a couch? And what this woman ended up doing was wrapping herself in a blanket and pushing up against her couch and rebirthing herself between this couch and some pillows that she had had. So we were able to guide them with a kinesthetic experience. We just have to get really creative.
Yeah.
And we how many did we done? those 2 weeks?
You know, it's worked really well. Our level 1, we're going to continue doing online because the transmission, we have found that, you know, with time and space, all of it being relative, that it comes through beautifully.
Yeah.
And I think we've run about 7. We're about ready to have our 8th 2-week online.
In 2 years.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
From people from all over the world.
And, you know, our level 2 is much more the hands-on experience of giving you that training experience. So we much prefer to do that in person. But our level 1 has really worked well for folks who are in other countries, and it cuts down the cost of travel. It cuts down the time commitment with folks who have families and jobs, and they're still able to walk between the worlds and to join us. So it's been a good birthing out of the pressure.
Yeah.
I found that too, because we put our training online and made it weekends only.
Mm-hmm.
Working mums could join who could never go to even a week retreat. So it really opened it up to other people, which is fantastic. Yeah.
We're being asked to, I think, be creative and more multidimensional.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, look, it has been fantastic speaking with you both today. Thank you very much for joining me and sharing your life's joy.
Thank you for having us on today. And, you know, can feel that you're a kindred soul, a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
And look forward to hugging you in the flesh someday. And
in Ireland.
In Ireland, we hope to see you there or here. And on top of our mountain, we have a beautiful retreat here in the oldest mountain range, they say, in the world, the Blue Mountains of Western North Carolina, next to Cherokee. So we look out, see the mountains all around us here. It's gorgeous. And we have elemental temples and where we do fire walks and sweat lodges and breath work and all kinds of amazing experiences on the earth. And we have an outdoor pavilion temple with a roof, and that we can have 50 people in breathing, and the mountains are surrounding us.
The elements.
And we breathe in the elements because we're shamanic breathwork.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.